So I thought I would say a few more things about my Rush Dave Grohl video. First of all, points of order. Neil Peart died in 2020, not 2016, and Taylor Hawkins passed away in Colombia, not Chile. Also, a few things I didn't mention, which are important. There were two Taylor Hawkins tribute shows, one in London and one in Inglewood/LA. Both of those shows were organized by the band, Dave Grohl, Foo Fighters, and Taylor Hawkins' spouse, Allison, his surviving widow now. And his son, Shane, played at one point in the show when the band played the song My Hero. Those are important details because you'll see. And as far as the Rush component, Dave Grohl did play on the 2112 suite with Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson, along with drummers Danny Carey, who I mentioned in my previous video, and Omar Hakim and Chad Smith. Omar Hakim has played with Sting and a bunch of other people. That's important to sort of frame the other video. Super, super, super important. Nice. Super, super, super important to clarify. In the Washington Post piece, Geddy Lee hedges his statements quite a bit. He even mentions that he hasn't even discussed this with Alex Lifeson, Rush guitarist Alex Lifeson, who also has his own health issues going on at the moment, and Lee explicitly says that would have to be resolved, or that, Lifeson would have to be in the healthiest place to even consider this. So he's not pushing it on Alex Lifeson. With that said, though, Geddy Lee is a music industry veteran. He's promoting his new book, his memoir. He's got a documentary out at the same time. He's got a publicity team. He's got management. He does understand, and I imagine his whole team must understand, that putting these statements out there will cause ripples, particularly with promoters. Now, whenever a journalist interviews someone and writes a story, and this is not taking shots at Washington Post contributor Jeff Edgers at all, who wrote the story, we are literally, as journalists, sculpting a shape out of the statements that the person delivers or gives us, or says out loud in the course of talking to them. So they say this whole sort of blob of things that they put on the table, and then we take that and we carve or sculpt a shape out of those statements. And then further, we put a slant, or we frame them and present them from a certain angle. If you read Jeff Edgers' piece, it ends on a cliffhanger note, which is, again, not casting any aspersions on him and what he was doing with this piece. It's to be expected that someone's going to do that. This is very standard. It's like, well, you never know, kind of a thing, like leaving it as a big question mark and kind of leaving it on this note of sunny optimism, like, oh, we don't know what's down the road. That's perfectly in bounds. And so it is premature for people to start getting excited. In a sense, the video I did is premature, but we've been through this same experience with other artists before, where there's these stirrings and then all of a sudden it's happening. Or maybe not all of a sudden, but all of a sudden we hear about it happening. And I just have to think that Lee, his publicist, and the band's management are not unaware of exactly how this is going to be received. This is going to cause murmurs that, hey, this is possible. This is literally putting it out there. He didn't have to say anything about this at all. I mean, he was asked, and I have certainly been in situations where I felt the person who was talking to me got comfortable and felt disarmed by the rapport we had established, and so maybe they were saying things that they might maybe not regret, but want to be more careful, look back on and be like, oh, I should have been more careful. I would rather have been more careful. I don't suspect that's the case here. That's just me, my gut hunch. I just think there's too much experience, too much seasoning, too much riding on this kind of thing. You know, and he left every door open for him to go, oh, you know, I didn't say that we were doing this. You know, I was very clear. I was very specific. I was very clear that, you know, I haven't even spoken to Alex, that this is not a done deal, that I'm just considering it. But there are also hints in what he said that he's looking to put his energy back into playing live music. And I just think that making that public in this way starts the gears turning. That's my suspicion. So, again, it's premature, but I am hoping that I am hoping this does happen. I don't know if this was clear in the video, in the other video. I'm hoping that they do a live touring sort of celebration thing, and then that is the closure to say goodbye to the person, the work, and the band itself, and then that Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson go on and do something recording wise that is not called Rush, that is totally different. I think there are lots of different things they could be exploring that are not in the same vein at all, and I don't know why you would do that, and I certainly don't know why you would call that by the band under the official band name. I just don't think that's called for. So I should mention, I recently watched a video where Dave Grohl was approached by people wanting him to sign records and memorabilia. And he politely goes up to the group of people and he sounds really sincere and says, look, I'm only going to say this once, but I only sign things when people ask me to do it for charity. And then he runs off to his limo and he gets in the limo and leaves, but he runs away in this slapstick, clearly it's meant to be funny and it's for their benefit that he's being funny, kind of like, I'll share a laugh with you kind of a thing. And I feel when I watch this video that there's clearly something about him that wants to be cool with people. But I also remember reading a Rolling Stone article from 1993, 1994. It was towards the end there, where he talks about what it's like to knock on Kurt Cobain and Courtney Love's hotel room door and walk in the room by mistake and seeing them basically like strung out on heroin, if I'm using the term strung out properly, like they're high, but they're barely conscious and immobile. And he talked about, I remember him using the phrase drooling fucking baby. That was the first time he's like, that was the first time I'd seen anyone in that kind of state. But what left more of an impression on me reading that article was when he said, we're not great friends and we're not even good friends. And I just thought that was so admirable for him to just be on the level like that and talk about this dynamic. Like, look, yeah, we care about each other, but we're not really tight. It's not like that. I would like to see more of that guy. I don't think there would be anything wrong with him being a little less sanitized in discussing Nirvana and Kurt Cobain. It sounds like he's being really polite and trying his best to recognize how much this person meant to millions and millions of people, and being very careful not to trample all over that. But if you want to look to somebody who didn't give a fuck about that and still didn't take anything away from the deceased person's legacy or his own or the band's legacy, just watch George Harrison talking about John Lennon after he died. And it's like, whoa, okay, these dudes were very, they were very sharp with one another. And then you compare that to the way Paul McCartney has been talking recently about this new Beatles song and how he's spoken about John Lennon. And it's like, well, where's the, I don't know, just sort of vanillifying our memory of this person when that's not really necessary. We all heard John Lennon say shit that was just like, wow, this guy's pretty caustic, right? And we all heard him say stuff that was really, really funny and charming. We can handle processing this person as a person for who they were in 3 dimensions, especially now after so much time has passed. And I feel like Dave Grohl has sort of slathered on this nice guy persona when, if he already has that in them, why dial it all the way up like that? And the other question I would have is, okay, so he did this tribute to Taylor Hawkins. All that adulation, all that love, all of that emotion coming from the crowd at that event. Who did that benefit? Who received all of that? All right, so as I mentioned, these tribute shows were put on with the participation of Taylor Hawkins' spouse, Allison, and their son, Shane, played in the show. So who does this benefit? I mean, clearly his family participated in this. There were also charity proceeds, as I mentioned before, Music Cares and music support. But I still think it's not unfair. I mean, I still think this begs the question more generally. So this is how people in the public eye show condolence for one another, and they do it with our participation. Now that might sound like a cynical way to look at it. I just think these are important questions to ask, though. Especially in a situation where there was speculation out there. I mentioned this in the first video about Hawkins' exhaustion, about how he felt that the band was booking more shows than he could tolerate, etc., etc. And there was the danger of these gestures appearing like they were just sort of papering over that, right? All that uncertainty, and trying to put a nice face on it for the fans, right? To sort of publicly surround this thing with like goodwill when there were questions there. Now, we have no idea what kinds of conversations Grohl had with Allison Hawkins. We don't know. I mean, they could have bluntly unpacked all, hashed all this out. But I feel like it would have, the tribute shows would have carried more weight if Grohl had addressed this stuff publicly, more directly. I also think we could have gotten something more interesting, more heartfelt, more profound, and something that shows us new dimensions to all these people had they done something different than just a rock show. Now, the 2 shows were spectacular. They had tons of guests. I mean, Paul McCartney, the James Gang, like lots and lots of people, members of Rush, members of Queen. The roster was just incredible. I mean, Paul McCartney was a surprise guest. That just goes to show how much these guys are liked among their peers. Just goes to show how much goodwill there is around this band. And not only Paul McCartney, not only Joe Walsh and the James Gang reunited for this special event, which is really exciting to me, but Nandi Bushell, who as a preteen her clip, her drumming challenge to Dave Grohl went viral, and he responded. And she was at the show, which is an amazing gesture. It's a beautiful gesture, and it's the kind of thing Dave Grohl is known for. It reminds me very much of the what I mentioned in the other video, which is the group of 1,000 musicians. I said 100 in the other video. It's 1,000. Rockin' 1,000 is the name of the troupe, of the ensemble. 1,000 people got together in this town in Italy named Cesena, and they performed a rendition of Learn to Fly, the Foo Fighters song Learn to Fly, which just happens to be my favorite song by them, and a video that I love. I'm not really big into Foo Fighters, but that song moves me, and that performance moves me, and the fact that they did that as a way of saying, hey, we want Foo Fighters to play this town, and Dave Grohl did it, again, goes to show this is a person who is known for extending himself in these kinds of ways. These are awesome things to do. And the fact that all these other musicians showed up just goes to show, again, how much these guys were liked, what the goodwill that they're surrounded by. And I think that's something worth celebrating. But would we have not had something more revealing and insightful, and that ultimately lasted longer, if, say, Brian Johnson did one of his interviews, Brian Johnson from AC/DC, did one of his interviews hanging out with Shane Hawkins, Taylor's son? Would it not have been more, would it not have gone further if Justin Hawkins of the band The Darkness read poems or I don't know, something that one of Hawkins' family members wrote about him that was maybe too shy to say it on camera to the public? Dave Grohl is nothing if not a storyteller. He's got that whole Sonic Highways series, which is all about stories and storytelling and getting in touch with what place means to people and their place in relation to location. I feel like something like that would have just carried more weight, and it would have shown us something more human about these people and allowed them to express themselves differently. Man, I love the idea of Brian Johnson reading poetry. Could you fucking imagine that? The singer of AC/DC reading a heartfelt poem from, I mean, I know I said Justin Hawkins, but even that would have been just like, wow, right? Allowing us to see into the gears more of how they respond when something like this happens to one of them, and how they connect to the humanity of it. Brian Johnson replaced Bon Scott in AC/DC. AC/DC was back up and running it was under 2 months. I mean, within days of this happening, the band was convinced, in part by Bon Scott's parents, to keep going. And it's just like, but it was like so quick how everything just picked back up. So, I mean, and the band has never been especially, I mean, it's AC/DC, right? They're not known for being super, I don't know, revealing. But, this was an opportunity to show us a different side of the professional musician, of the rock star. And sure, I can see, okay, we're going to share this with our fans and people are going to cheer and we're going to have this cathartic moment or 2 moments. But I don't know, it just seems like the most obvious thing. Apparently it was healing for other people involved, including Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson. So there's that. Like, we don't know what it's like to be in that line of work. So that's cool and interesting and valuable to see. But it's our cheering. Like, it's like the fans that are playing a role in someone in the public eye moving forward from their bandmate dying. I'm not sure how I feel about that. And especially in light, like I said, of the fact that the band, went away to sort of gather themselves for a while, but then it wasn't very long before they were like, oh yeah, we got some festival dates now. We're turning the ignition, the machine is back on. And I can't fault anybody for wanting to continue playing. There's no reason why you should, right? Somebody in your band ends up dying in a way that is, according to the reports, there was potentially an element of some self-inflicted aspect in terms of the substance use, right? No one's expecting you to put your life on hold, but it's this kind of gesture where you get a bunch of rock musicians and it's like, well, we're rock stars. What are we going to do? Well, we're going to play a show. We're going to do the same fucking thing we do every other day that we're working. We're going to get in front of a crowd and we're going to be cheered on. It's like, can you show reverence or condolence for someone's life, for someone who has departed in any other way than that? Is that really, is that like the only gear these guys have? Is the only thing these people know how to do is to get attention? Is that like the one button you push? Oh, we're going to a funeral. Okay, I'm going to ham it up, right? Now look, I could be completely wrong about this. I'm not even saying I'm certain that that's what I feel about it. It just makes me, I just feel a twinge of, I'm not sure. Like, again, I could be way off. I actually would like to talk to somebody who played that show and get their insights. I mean, listening to Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson from Rush, it seems this was helpful to them, right? It was like they had lost somebody. Wolfgang Van Halen had lost somebody. So I understand. And somebody in that position could turn around and be like, look, this is our job. This was one of our peers, and we went to like the site where a work site, and we did what we know how to do. Like, what's the big deal? Why are you reading something negative or inconsiderate or disingenuous into this? And I'm not necessarily reading it into there. It just feels off. I'm being clearly somewhat facetious when I talk about this as an emergency video, because I think it's ridiculous when people post emergency videos about a topic they absolutely have to talk about. There are aspects about Dave Grohl. My friends tease me and say that I have Dave Grohl derangement syndrome. There are aspects that have irked me. I've heard him talk about a couple of my favorite metal bands. There's a clip from a 1996 European festival, I believe it's in Belgium, where there's like a TV segment that's edited with live footage of one of my favorite bands, Sepultura. And he's interviewed on there, and it's just like the most grating. It's like, wow, you're talking about somebody I love, that we both love, and it's fucking annoying. Like, I'll link to that video in the description. He's like, they're just awesome. Have you heard the new record? It's awesome. And then he goes on and says that metal, there's nothing left in metal and people have exhausted all the possibilities. Like, well, clearly you haven't been listening enough. Like, that's, whenever anybody says that, it's because they're not aware of the great things that are happening in a particular genre. Whenever it's like, oh, it's over. Is it over, or have you not heard enough of what's going on? And he's wearing a Black Sabbath t-shirt, and he like awkwardly gets up so that he goes like this so that the camera can see the t-shirt. And it reminded me of how awkward those guys were and squeamish they were about being in front of the camera. I can understand that, right? But it's like they had a conceit about resisting putting themselves or generating this image for themselves, but it just came across as clumsy and unable to sort of stand behind the magnitude of what they had accomplished. You can fucking take a picture. There's plenty of classic photos of them. But you watch them on camera and they were not very media savvy at all. They were very camera shy and always awkward and goofy. And so then you go from that person to this then very smooth presentation of this vanilla persona, which again, I'm not suggesting is not actually in there in his makeup. I really liked what I saw in that clip with the people signing stuff. And just for some context, this is a really funny clip of Mick Mars from Motley Crue signing autographs. Or maybe it was when I interviewed Mick Mars, which was one of the most hilarious interviews I had ever done, where he talked about people. I know Mick Mars told me about people, and I don't mean to name drop and brag, but in that interview, I learned that there are people who have famous musicians sign things and then they auction them away on, they sell them right away, which is really kind of skeevy. And yeah, so I remember now what he told me was he would sort of like feel it out, right? Like if he thought that the person, if he could sort of sense or smell it on them, that the person was, just a con artist, he'd be like, F you. But if he thought it would be meaningful to somebody, he would sign stuff. And so Dave Grohl is contending with that same thing. You can hear the way people are sort of nipping at him. And one of them says, you said that in D.C. or you said that somewhere and signed stuff in D.C. the next day, as if like Dave Grohl owes it to us to do that. And it's like, nah, someone's going to make money just off my signature. So I can completely understand that. But there was something that I felt came across as very, very from the heart. And what's interesting about it is that it was balanced, right? There was a blend of, I'm saying no to you. I have to say no. This is a boundary I've drawn. But I want you to understand. It was almost like he really, not pleading, but he was really appealing to their understanding. That to me sounded like a real person. Dave Grohl on Howard Stern talking about, yeah, things got weird towards the end. You sort of started to get a glimpse of the real person versus on other shows where he sort of vanillifies Kurt Cobain. And we have clips of Kurt Cobain. It's actually quite parallel to John Lennon in a way. He's very caustic in certain ways, right? We have to understand that people who are in the public eye to that degree and who receive so much adulation have to find a way to present themselves, to be, to exist, to express, to relate, that is palatable to them, that they can live with. And we don't have to make that choice. I mean, I guess with more and more of us on platforms like this, expressing ourselves publicly, and now the average person can grow and mushroom into like having a huge following. I guess we are sort of more, all of us, closer to grasping what that's like. So I'm not faulting Dave Grohl for that, but I do think bringing that into certain moments where someone has died and you're still kind of playing into or pandering maybe to the fans' love of that person. I don't want to see that happen if Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson end up doing something, some live shows. I think the most dignified thing for him to do, I mean, I joked and said the best drum solo he'll ever play is to not say anything, is to be quiet. But it's like, it would be more dignified. It'd be more like, hey, I'm going to let these two and their fan base sort of have this to themselves. And, look, if Dave Grohl becomes a radio host, I mean, if Lars Ulrich can do it and do it well in a really engaging way, Dave Grohl can go up there and talk to people. But I mean, I would want him to, again, give us the guy who said what he said to Rolling Stone in the 90s. give us the guy, show us a glimpse of, hey, listen, I'm only going to say this once. I only do this for charity, and then runs off to the limo. It's really, really funny. And to me is the most relatable that I've ever seen him come across on camera. Also, with regard to his drumming, he has a thing that he does that is unmistakably his. There's a personality, there's a character to his playing that only he can do. Which, I mean, there's a lot to be said for that. That's like the ultimate thing as a musician that you want to achieve. I understand if if this video comes off as like bashing Dave Grohl, it's more about, I guess, what we will buy into, right? Are we being misled when someone dangles our love for someone who passed away and our grief and then advances, like makes a certain presentation along with that? I mean, I don't know. It would just seem to be more appropriate to be like, look, I'm fucked up about this. I don't know what you guys are feeling. I need some time. But the tribute shows, throwing a tribute show where you get the applause. I'm not sure how I feel about that.